March 2019, Coral Gables, Florida. Ramon Diaz, a veteran of 15 years at the school, believed he knew every secret of its infrastructure until a fateful knock revealed a hidden cavity. What lay sealed behind that wall since 1962 was a secret never intended to be rediscovered. The basement smelled like old concrete and rusty pipes. Ramon had been sent down to fix a leaking pipe in a far corner. That's when his hand touched the wall. The wall sounded hollow. After scraping away layers of old paint, a metal door revealed itself. 15 minutes later, he pushed it open. Behind it stood a heavy steel door. Faded lettering was still legible. Follow out shelter. Authorized personnel only. Capacity 150. Civil Defense 1962. He stood there speechless for a moment, swallowing hard. 1962, the year of the Cuban Crisis. The door groaned open. The sound was strange, not just a creak. It was the deep moan of air that had been trapped inside for 60 years finally breaking free. Ramon stumbled back half a step. First, the air hit him. Cold, dense, stale in a way that felt almost alive, like breathing in a room that had been holding its breath before it was even born. It pressed against his face like a damp cloth. He coughed once, the air thick and cold. His shirt sleeve instinctively came up to cover his mouth. His flashlight cut through the darkness. A narrow corridor stretched out before him. The walls were painted that particular shade of green, the kind you only see in old government buildings and hospitals from the 1950s. Clinical, oppressive. The paint was peeling in long strips, pulling away from the concrete like dead skin. Ramon stood at the threshold and didn't move. This is wrong, his mind screamed. This place was never supposed to be found. Still, he stepped inside. The floor was rough beneath his boots. Dust, decades of it, shifted with every step. Along the left wall, rusty bunk beds, 3 tiers high, still made. The thin mattresses had rotted and collapsed into themselves. But the wool blankets, gray, government issue, were still folded at the foot of each bed, neat, patient, as if whoever left them fully planned on coming back. On the shelf above the first bunk sat a transistor radio, perfectly still. Ramon reached for it, then stopped. Touching it felt wrong, like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. He swung the flashlight to the right wall. Shelves, floor to ceiling, water canisters, large olive green containers lined up in rows. The labels had faded but were still readable. Emergency supply, expiration, 1965. Water stored to keep children alive in the event of a nuclear war. Ramon's throat tightened. He counted the canisters slowly. There were enough for weeks. The people who built this shelter weren't thinking in hours or days. They were thinking in months, preparing for a world where coming back up to the surface might never be possible again. He kept walking. The corridor curved gently to the left and opened into a second room, larger, stocked with medical supplies. Bandages still in their packages, a hand-cranked generator, its crank rusted stiff, a 1961 first aid manual, a smiling family on the cover, and the title, What to Do in a Nuclear Emergency. Ramon stared at the cover for a long moment, then he moved on. At the end of the corridor was a third room. He almost missed the door. It blended into the wall, same green paint, same peeling surface, but someone had written on it, in chalk. The letters had faded but were perfectly legible. Mr. Henderson, October 24th, 1962. Ramon read it twice. The flashlight flickered, just once, less than half a second. But in that half second, standing alone 60 feet beneath a school in a 60-year-old shelter, Ramon Diaz felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. Real fear. He stood in front of the door for a full minute before reaching for the handle. October 24th. He wasn't a historian, but he knew that date. Everyone in Florida knew that date. It was the most dangerous day of the Cuban crisis. The threat of global conflict had the world on edge. The day President Kennedy and the Joint Chiefs waited in sealed rooms just like this one, as Soviet ships crept closer to the naval blockade. The day millions of Americans went to sleep not knowing if they'd wake up to a world still intact. And behind this door, a teacher had left something behind. The room felt frozen in time. Not like an old room, not like an abandoned room, frozen, as if someone had hit the pause button in October 1962 and nothing inside had dared to move since. Ramon pushed open the door and stepped in. Wooden desks, 19 of them, arranged in uneven rows, the way students actually sit, not the way teachers arrange them, crooked. Some pushed together. At the front of the room, a chalkboard, written on it in large, deliberate letters, "Write what matters, write the truth." Then the flashlight reached the teacher's desk. On top of it, a stack of papers, yellowed, fragile, held together with a carefully tied piece of twine. Someone had tied that knot so it could be found. Ramon slowly untied it. The first letter was written in a teenager's large, looping handwriting, confident strokes, but in some words, the pen had pressed harder, as if the hand holding it wasn't entirely steady. It began, "Dear Mom and Dad." Ramon read 3 lines. Then he stopped. He set the letter down. He placed both hands on the desk and took a long, slow breath. Because in those 3 lines, a 13-year-old child, sitting underground with no idea if the world above still existed, had described that feeling in plain, simple words. No drama, no hysteria, just quiet, honest, frightened love for 2 people they might never see again. Ramon was 52 years old. He had never cried at work in his life. He was crying now. There were 19 letters in total. He had expected despair, pure panic. But these letters were none of that. One boy wrote that he wanted to become a teacher. A girl dreamed of space, of going further than anyone else. One kid wrote 3 full paragraphs about basketball, as if he were trying to fill every empty space with something beautiful. A girl wrote that she wanted to be a doctor, that she had already decided, "Nothing, not even this, can stop me." Ramon read every single one. When he finished, the world above felt like it belonged to someone else's life. He sat alone in that underground classroom, surrounded by the voices of 19 children who had written on the most terrifying day of the 20th century. Not about fear, but about the future, about the stubborn, heartbreaking human need to believe that a future still existed. At the bottom of the stack was one final letter. From Robert J. Henderson, history teacher. He wrote that the announcement had come at 11:47 a.m. "This is not a drill." He said he was scared, but he couldn't show it. So he told the students to write letters, not because he was certain about what the future held, but because he wanted to give them a sense of control. They stayed in that shelter for 6 hours. 6 hours of intense uncertainty, where the future felt like it could shatter at any moment. At 6 p.m., the announcement came. The crisis was easing. They could go home. Before they left, a student named Maria said, "Let's leave the letters here for the future." And so they did. The door was sealed and forgotten. The school administration began searching. Yearbooks, archives, records. They found them. Tommy Rodriguez, retired firefighter, Maria Santos became a teacher. David Cohen worked on the Apollo program. Rosa Martinez, pediatrician for 45 years. 7 had passed away. 12 were still alive. All of them were in their 70s. April 2019. The school's conference hall was packed. The former students stood on the stage, grandmothers and grandfathers now. Tommy said, "For 6 hours we thought it was all over." Maria said, "I became a teacher because of Mr. Henderson." David sent a video message recalling the Apollo 11 moon landing. He said he thought of that basement, that dark corridor, the teacher who chose courage. The shelter was not a place of fear. It was a place of humanity. Teachers and students gathered together. They sat in the old classroom desks, just as they had been left, wearing period clothing to honor and remember the past. From that point on, the shelter would be used for remembrance and reflection. Every October 24th, students now descend into that shelter. They read the letters. They learn about the Cuban Missile Crisis. But more importantly, they learn that history isn't just about missiles. It's about people, about choices, about courage in small rooms. The end. This story is inspired by the historical events surrounding the Cuban crisis. Some characters, names, and narrative elements have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to specific individuals beyond the documented historical context is purely fictional. Note, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring historical narratives and human stories. Please share your reflections in the comments below.